Welcome back. You're watching Cheche live on Citizen TV. We have Senator Kipchumba Murkomen and Dr. Ekuru Aukot. They're today's guests, and we're discussing the Security Laws Amendment Bill, which critics, who include Dr. Aukot, argue limit the rights of Kenyans. And before the break, we were talking about the media. And so let's just put that into perspective. Any person who, without authorization from the National Police Service, broadcasts any information which undermines investigations of security operations relating to terrorism commits an offence and is liable to a conviction, on conviction, to a term of imprisonment for a term not exceeding 3 years or to a fine not exceeding 5 million shillings or both. A person who publishes or broadcasts photographs of victims of a terrorist attack without the consent of the National Police Service and of the victim commits an offence and is liable on conviction to a term of imprisonment not exceeding 3 years or to a fine of 5 million shillings or both. And then section 3, which says, notwithstanding subsection 2, any person may publish or broadcast factual information of a general nature to the public. You were making the point that...
Yeah, I was just making the point that if you look at 30F 1 and 2, you will find that the idea here is to ensure that you don't first undermine the process of investigation. The manner in which we covered the Westgate could have actually assisted a terrorist command center, if it was somewhere, to tell them, okay, we can see the police have arrived this corner, you run from this side and so forth. So you must be not undermine the investigation. So sometimes the police are making certain tremendous efforts in terms of reaching a particular stage. Then somebody comes out with an investigative piece which is already undermining that process as well. So there must be that, but then you must not forget one thing, that, and then you have people who are also glorifying terrorists. You know, you are making certain efforts to, you know, make it look like it's a movie or it's a, you know, a film of some sort, and people are just enjoying themselves. You are not taking it seriously as a national security issue. But then let me come to subsection 3. However, if you are giving a factual information of general nature, you have not captured, you know, bodies of people, you know, exposed them.
But that's a fact that people have been killed?
Yeah, it's a fact. That's what I'm saying. Generally, you say 36 people have been killed. The scenes there are horrendous. We are unable to publish. You know, that's what I always, you know.
If you hadn't seen the horrendous pictures from Mandera, would heads have rolled?
That's what I'm saying. It's not also a permanent ban. It's just, you know, cautionary approach.
First of all, in fact, I'm totally opposed to that provision, and I think it must be deleted. One, media freedom is something that we really fought for a long time in this country. And media, I mean, I'm not a journalist, but I think some issues are very spontaneous. I mean, they're very timely. When they happen, people must be told. And really, that provision, the intent of 1(2) is actually to excuse the failings of government and of institutions that are charged with security. To say that don't expose us because of our failings. Like you rightfully asked, if Mandera was not exposed, you know, because initially there was a bus, then another attack, and then others followed. So I think for me, it is important that the media is not gagged. I believe the media is very responsive, and they ought to be responsive in the way they report. I think what this law is trying to do in this amendment is to actually dictate to the media how to do it. Exactly. Can you imagine, for example, in the wake of an attack, a terrorist attack, for example, that you have to write to the Inspector General of Police to seek permission? I mean, what? I mean,
doesn't this have to do with the investigative piece?
Yes,
Hang
exactly.
on, because remember, we still haven't held anybody accountable for the failures of Westgate. And so you have an investigative piece that documents those failures. And people are, thank you, and people are embarrassed by that. And so they say, before we allow you to embarrass us, you must come to us for permission.
Not necessarily, because you have been told here that as long as the information is factual, you have nothing to fear. But the point...
Well, what is general by the Senator? What is
that will be determined by the court. Can I conclude my point?
When the military stole from Westgate, do you think they were very happy to see them being...
That has nothing to do with terrorism. You see, the point here is that...
It was terrorism?
Yeah, they were doing something over and above terrorism. They were stealing. There were thieves at
well,
that point in time.
they were investigating.
No problem, but as long as they are acting outside the mandate of... We all know that stealing water is not part of investigation.
I don't think they were stealing water, they were thirsty.
Yeah, maybe they were thirsty.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just saying, even a supposed stealing of water and food and so maybe they were hungry. But why jewels? Because they're saying jewelry, was stolen. But the point here is that...
a terrorist attack.
Exactly. So the point here is that, first of all, Udwak, you must appreciate here that it is limited to terrorism only. You know, this is very limited to terrorism. Two, that information must deal with specifics of trying to undermine investigation. So the investigation must be ongoing and must be active and must be, you know, so it is, and finally, let me say this. It is not possible, and I want to go back to my initial point, for anyone to make an argument that it will take away constitutional rights. Because as I told you, there are only 4 rights that cannot be derogated on. All the other rights, including freedom of information, freedom of broadcast, can be limited to the extent that you are protecting the interests of many other Kenyans. And last, I remember the mainstream media are careful, because they know the implications. The public can run away from watching your station. It can lead to a situation where, you know...
We're professional ethics.
Exactly. But you have new
individuals, social media activists. Right.
This is social media has actually taken over from mainstream media when it comes to publication of such kind of information.
This is the era of technology.
So let me say this. Yeah. First of all, the media should not be brought to bear the cost of the sins of the social media and other pretenders to journalism. Those must be isolated. Two, that very provision of publishing gory pictures and disturbing images is covered by the Media Act under Professional Ethics 101 of journalism. Three, that provision is flatly unconstitutional. If you look at Article 34 of the Constitution, the media shall operate without order, authority of anybody. That it should actually arise, anyone should craft a law that says without the permission of the National Police Service, of all the institutions.
Can you imagine?
Which institution ought to be checked by the same media? So we go to them to ask for permission to publish a story or pictures or anything or any story that might undermine investigations. Which
on terrorism.
Yes. You know, the question does not segregate.
I want to write on
terrorism or nothing. Yeah. There is no law. There is no provision in the Constitution that allows the media to get permission or sanction from anybody. Yeah. So and that, from that point of view, is first of all
and this is really why I said my opening statement was that if we allow this kind of laws, whether they are amendments or new laws or not, actually they are enabling at the very Constitution that actually protects those fundamental rights and freedoms. You can now see, right from the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual, they're now going to institutions like the media. And God knows who next they are going to go after.
Next will be Murkomen.
So I'm thinking, Murkomen himself here may cease to be a senator and on the side of the ruling coalition.
I'm not planning to be a terrorist.
No,
so I have no fear. I have no fear at all.
You will be suspected.
Why are you construing opposition to the bill as support for terrorists?
Who said you'll be a terrorist?
Because we are not the opposition of the bill. You see, a leader or an average citizen must not just operate around the edge of the law. You must operate far away from the, people who are worried about...
so you do see it then, criticism as support for terrorism?
About whether they will be found publishing information about terrorists, whether they will be found dealing with matters of terrorism, are people who are operating on the edge of the law.
But
every other citizen must there is intolerance to out there for law-abiding citizens that have no...
You know what, I really think, Senator, need to be honest with Kenyans. Yeah. When we are giving this criticism, we are not necessarily supporting terrorism. We have also said to you that this law has actually failed to address the underlying causes, for example, of terrorism or of insecurity. If today you told us that this law was amending the law to say that, of course, which is not anything new, to say our Kenya Defense Forces must man our borders, like Kenyans have proposed. Let's see stations in our porous borders. And we know that our borders are porous. And that's one of the reasons why terrorists easily come into Kenya. So, but that is not being addressed. So, Senator, take this criticism constructively and let's improve on the law.
Absolutely.
And secondly, I have not refused. And secondly, let's speak about the underlying causes of terrorism, the failings in the past, and how this law is actually helping us improve. But don't duplicate laws. I mean, this is a nullity. It's an exercise in futility. You can pass it because of tyranny of numbers.
Not at all. Not at all.
No, I'm saying you can pass it.
Where's the accountability?
But let me just say this.
Because you haven't answered this. I've brought this up several times. Westgate, who was responsible for that failure? What happens to them?
First of all, let me say this, that security matters, even in countries that have faced terrorism, are not supposed to be handled using tyrant of numbers. It must be consensus of the nation that everybody requires security of property. And I want to tell my colleagues in National Assembly, those who are going to go to Parliament to just rubber stamp a law because they think they have numbers is wrong. We must allow space for us to debate. And that's why I'm sticking to the law. Today, for the first time, you see me holding the Constitution, holding the bill. Yes. Because you see, this is a very serious area.
I understand that.
And therefore, accountability, if you read this law, one of the most important provisions of accountability is where we are saying that we will punish all the officers that are going to aid and abet terrorism. We have provided for in the law here that even immigration officers must be accountable to the institutions that have been created. But the ultimate accountability anyway is to the courts, that every citizen in this country can take any public officer to court for actually failing to perform their duties.
Okay, so does that mean then, because again, we have not seen any accountability over Westgate, we have not seen any accountability over Capedo. So how does this law address that?
Well, as I said earlier, no, I want to be very honest, that in matters of terrorism or security, law is just one of the areas. There are certain failings that are individual.
Kipchumba, you're not answering that because you're going after the small fry, but not the people who should be taking political responsibility, operational responsibility.
The question Senator is avoiding is what I started by saying, that the problem with our security is we are politicized and ethnicized. And now, you know, if we depoliticize in security matters, we will not need this kind of law. If we de-ethnicize, we will not need this kind of law. Like I said, in Capedo, leaders from a community actually confessed on behalf of their people who killed our 21 police officers and even begged to be given time to return guns. We did not see any heads roll. But yet, when Mpeketoni happened, we saw the anger, and so was Westgate, up to a time when Issa Timami, actually the governor of Lamu, was actually put in. Even in Lamu, there was no confession, but in other... So the way we are treating matter security preferentially, we are politicizing them because maybe some people are just wild animals to be killed, so we don't effect any arrest. So I think for me, you're actually escaping away from addressing the underlying causes of insecurity. And this law is just but an excuse.
But let me say something, Udwak. Already there are institutions for accountability. You have IPOA, you have Commission of Administration of Justice, if there are unfairness in terms of what's happening, what my colleague is saying here. You have institutions like courts. You have even a right to institute private prosecutions, you know, by making that application. So I think it is...
what we are saying is, what is the executive doing about it?
I'm just saying, well...
Forget about the others and me and
let me complete by saying that a citizen who is aggrieved by inaction or action of the executive, and there is no better person who knows those provisions than my colleague here, who was in the midst of it,
but you know,
so that we can take advantage.
But you know what Murkomen is telling me? What Murkomen is telling me is that, fine, Ekuru, somebody can target to kill you. I'm not going to do anything about it, even though we are paying you to do that. But you can go to Ombudsman. You can go to...
That is a lie. That is a lie. I just said when the executive fail. Yeah, if they have not implemented...
So as the executive failed?
No, I'm just saying if they fail, for example, in the implementation of a report like Westgate.
As the executive then failed?
I think it was Parliament, we failed in Parliament. Because,
so as the executive failed?
I'm just saying on the Westgate issue, I think we failed in Parliament. Because we
not
carried
the executive?
out... No, let me complete.
Okay.
We carried out certain investigations in the parliamentary committee and came to certain conclusions that tied the hands of the executive from acting. And so as Parliament also... Yeah, there was a report by the security committee that cleared any possibility of wrongdoing by any officer in the army at that point in time. But we must appreciate, personally as a citizen of this country, I think we did badly in the Westgate. And that's why from the lessons of Westgate, we are coming up with legislation on coordination. We are coming up with legislation that increases the accountability. I think we could have done better in the Westgate.
Okay, let's talk about Capedo. There were confession.
But you see now,
No, let's be honest. Because you're talking about
what law is missing there.
What law is missing there?
I know why my colleague here is dragging me to that issue.
Yes, of course, it's an important issue.
Me and him, we saw it on television. Yeah? And the context of what statements were made on TV, I don't know. The best person to be able to do that investigation is the police and the DPP.
You see?
And DPP knows very well is independent from the executive itself. Yeah, so
unfortunately, I feel like you're trivializing this.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I'm just saying I know where Ekuru is coming from. You know, Ekuru is a resident of that area.
If we may retrace our footsteps back.
Okay, let's remove Kapedo. Yes, let's remove Kapedo. Can we talk about let's remove Kapedo?
I'm not saying remove Kapedo. I'm just saying that in the circumstances, he knows very well that everybody is presumed innocent until proved guilty.
Even when
previously 40 policemen were killed. Before Kapedo, previously 40 police were killed.
Baragoe.
Yes. And nothing, and the report has not.
And nothing has happened. So why don't I expect another 50 to be killed somewhere else?
And nothing.
And then we start another.
Yeah, I think what Aukot was talking about is that there was a colleague there, a politician, who was heard saying that, oh, this happened because of this.
Not was heard, it was reported.
Was reported. I saw on the television.
Yes.
But you cannot. I don't know the context. And I don't know how far
and
the
by the way, if that issue was not important, would the chief executive of this country
go to the place?
KDF, not even go. I mean, after he went and even ordered. But you know what? Let's forget about Kapedo. What about Mandera?
Mandera, you know, many people have been interdicted. You've seen action is, you know, people are going to the ground. And you know, but you see, we are forgetting one factor here, that we are dealing with terrorism. And that's why we're providing law for border security, better coordination of migration issues, and coming together of these agencies. And some people
the unfortunate part of this, Murkomen, and why any attempts to curb or strangle or restrict the media from robust reporting about these issues is that we already have a history of inactivity, of unaccountability.
Yes.
Yet the reports are coming out. In fact, the reason why the media publish these reports is so that they can provoke, they can shock, so that the government can do something about it.
Yes.
So far, it has not been able to even achieve that litmus test of responding effectively. Now you can imagine when there will be a quiet in the reporting of it.
I think you are...
How many more atrocities will happen without anyone ever raising a finger? Because you say 30 people were killed in Mandera yesterday. Quiet.
And you know, Makalia,
no, but you know,
Makalia, Udak, Senator, we are also dealing with a culture of very short memory in this country, where we forget and move on. You know, and I think for me, what Makalia is raising a very fundamental point, that if the government had actually demonstrated level of seriousness, level of accountability in what has already happened in the past, I think it's fair to say to Kenyans, you know what, I think now we are dealing with a more heightened threat to this country's security, terrorism. I think we need you to give us this more power. Because this, what you are saying here, this law is asking the people of Kenya, give us more power to do this. But we who are critical of this law, we are saying,
power you already have.
We already have a lot of power. Yes. You have even failed in some of the simplest things. And you know what, let me give you an example. If today I have my Mulika Mwizi walking on the streets of Nairobi and somebody violently takes it away from me, do you know what the law described that as? Robbery with violence. And probably I could even hang by the neck until I die, as the law says. But my cows are stolen with an AK-47 and my house is burnt down and even a killing happens, maiming, manslaughter and rest, and it's being dismissed as cultural practice or cattle rustling, whatever that animal is. Okay? So all we are saying is, even with existing legislations, you are now telling the media, do not report until we give you permission. When you've been sleeping on the job already, now you can imagine you'll even go into slumberland, into whatever planet that
nobody ever knows.
First of all,
really my fear.
Or aggressively.
First of all,
that's my fear.
Let's stick to the facts.
Yeah.
The broadcast part is only focusing on terrorism. Cattle rustling is not terrorism.
Well,
it's a different kind of crime.
Still.
And I agree with him that it must be defined actually. Even cattle rustling is not a crime, in my own opinion.
But not.
It should be robbery with violence, as he's saying, or robbery or theft. You know, depending on the circumstance, whether he's carrying a gun or not carrying. But because in this country, if you are only carrying a weapon like a gun or a knife or a panga or a machetes of whatever kind, it turns out to be robbery with violence. And I totally agree with Aukot here.
Very quickly.
So the thing we must stick to is that we are dealing with terrorism, and we are dealing with the minimum exceptions. And what I like about this discussion, I wish this discussion, and by also our colleagues who are opposed to this bill, would lead to, however, let's amend it in this manner.
I think you had the suggestions of that.
That's what I'm saying. It is because public participation is going on.
With that clause.
You have had suggestions from the panel here. But very quickly, there's too much militarization of Kenyan society. Did we need KDF in Westgate? Look at the NYS Immigration Department. That came from David Macharia in Webuye. Good morning. When you add a KDF officer or whoever in a committee, which in your view is already tainted, it's a matter of time. You can't beat them, then join them. You need to address the core, which is corruption.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how does your security bill address that?
It punishes those who are going to aid crime if the motive was because they
Again,
were...
the small fish.
If the motive... It is the small fish which is bringing all these problems.
Is it really?
Yes, yes. If you are a small immigration officer in Liboy or somewhere in Mandera, and you are a small person, you are the lowest ranked officer in that place, and you are given a bribe to allow someone to come in who is not a citizen of this country.
Aren't you able to do that because
there is
leadership?
In terms of corruption, let me say this. Yeah. No one will defend corruption in this country.
First of all,
it is the disease that is actually the root cause of many problems across the country. And corruption has been reported to be from the small fish to the big man who is going to receive at the tail end, or is it the head end of that corruption in terms of whatever. And so dealing with corruption is not in doubt in my mind that it's the only way we can
I think one has to correct one thing. Let's not describe people as small person. There is no small person in this country, even as the laws describe. I think for me the problem is that we have always targeted the people lower down there, and we keep on excusing the people who are actually responsible, who are holding bigger titles and saying, I am so and so, I'm in charge. And I think that is where this law, in my view, fails in terms of accountability, which I think is not really addressing. Where does the buck stop on matters security?
The president.
I can see, well, not necessarily, even, okay. Ultimately the president, but also there are individuals, I mean, in between. And for me, I think we keep on, before we probably even get to the president himself, I think some people really must take the flag.
Okay. I want us, Woodwork, to look at the other proposals, which relate to the appointment of the Inspector General of Police.
Actually, a viewer puts it this way. I have a feeling that the executive is covering its failures by pretending that the law is the issue. After the law is amended, they will hire a Class 2 dropout with fake degrees from a non-existent university as Inspector General on the basis of tribe. The issue is leadership and management competence rather than laws. Absolutely. And I think that's the point you're getting at, David.
What is the point of removing the appointment procedures established under the National Police Act, Police Service Act, to guarantee the independence of the Inspector General?
Absolutely.
Seeing where we have come from, that the police Inspector General is not independent to do, he will always be under the command of the executive to do even political jobs.
Let me say
that's
this.
What we are running from.
And that's where I wanted
us to go. An imperial president.
Article 245 of the Constitution provides that the Inspector General is appointed by the President with the approval of Parliament.
Yes.
These are the additional procedures that we put in an Act of Parliament. It's not in the Constitution. 2, it says in Article
why are they not in the which procedures are those that are not in the law?
Yeah, just come to that. The Constitution is very clear. 245 2A is appointed by the President with the approval of Parliament and shall exercise independent command over the National Police Service and perform any other functions prescribed in national legislation. The fact that the President can appoint and disappoint does not mean that he cannot do his work independently. But go to 245.7, it says the Inspector General may be removed from office by the President only on the following grounds. It doesn't say through a tribunal and so forth. The tribunal were provided for in an Act of Parliament called National Police Service Act. So we have realized that every time we are saying that the buck stops with the President as the Commander-in-Chief, the Constitution never contemplated a situation where you would have to go through tribunals. Because where the Constitution talked about tribunal, it is sanctity.
Yes.
It is for the judges and so forth. But an Act of Parliament, National Police Service Act, provided for tribunals, provided for interviews and so forth.
Yes.
For me, it is safer when an Inspector General is serving at the pleasure of the President. Because if ultimately the buck stops with the President must have the opportunity to be able to appoint and disappoint that person, because when there is insecurity in the country, the Kenyans are not asking the Inspector General. They ultimately say the person who has political responsibility and the promise of a government of the day is the security of
What about when the President wants to misuse the Inspector General?
If he misuses that Inspector General, there is a provisions in law for dealing with that misuse, because he has other responsibility in law to act independently. Just the way the President appoints the Attorney General does not mean that he must act against the law.
Let me come to that. When we were making that provision of the Constitution to give the President this power so that he can enjoy, of course, the confidence of the person in charge of security. But if we now say that he be at will to appoint and disappoint that person, we're actually backsliding where we came from.
Exactly.
But there is Parliament.
No, Senator,
just a minute.
Senator, I was the custodian of all the the memoranda that Kenya has brought, and they said let's professionalize service provision in Kenya, including the people we appoint. So like that person is saying, the problem is not really about President being able to appoint or disappoint. It's about who is it that you are giving us to do this job. And I will tie that to Chapter 6 of the Constitution that talks about competence and suitability to do the job. Now, if you put in a person there just because you are trying to balance ethnic numbers or regions and stuff like that, that's where we go wrong in this country. And that's why security becomes compromised. Because we must appoint somebody who I think sings our tune. And I think for me, that is where the fundamental problem is. When Kenyans pass that, they did not say the president, so you go willing.
Now, people are saying Kimayo was Kalejin, so the Inspector General must be Kalejin.
That is the discretion of the appointing authority.
What is
it must
amendment?
Be. Let me tell you, Kenyans are saying, I remember when the security, let me complete
Senator,
this.
When we are also not born last night. We know it's the discretion of the appointing authority, but we also know how these things are being done politically.
Can I come to that? When insecurity worsened in the recent few weeks, Kenyans told the president, and I remember reading from social media, that appoint anyone, even your own brother, as long as our security is safe in this nation. So it's not about the. I think there are certain things. The position of Inspector General is one. You can balance tribes with other positions, but you must balance this one with competence. You know, it must be best on. But the Constitution does not also avoid a situation where you can appoint a person out of balancing the whole system. One Inspector General, one is a deputy, ensuring that they come from different communities. Because we can't, it's not a lie, it's a lie also to say that you can't get competences in other communities. That's true. So at the end of the day, you must look at competence as a first issue, and then say, out of the most competent people, how do we balance what the Constitution says, regional and ethnic balance?
And by the way, we did not say now, when we say about picking somebody who's competent, I think for me the question has been, even like you say, today you can even get the most educated among the Ogiek, or even the Chamus, or some of these small tribes. I think the question is we have always overlooked them because we say, after all,
they don't have numbers.
They don't have numbers politically speaking. What have they contributed? I think for me, we deliberately refuse to pick those. Like now, it's almost a written rule that if we, right from Katole, Saitoti means insecurity, Katole, Metito, Olelenku, now Kaiseri. I mean, Kaiseri is a good guy and I like him. But I think that's almost the script. Go to the other national security agencies, it has to be either Mwangi, Aweru, Kamau, and all the rest. You know,
I think you're shooting yourself again.
No, I'm not shooting myself on the foot. All I'm saying is we need to depoliticize and de-ethnicize. Because that is the image that is being projected. And the moment you paint that image, Senator, I mean, people, I think, go to sleep somehow. And they say, after all, for me, I pledge loyalty to the person who appointed me and not necessarily the people of Kenya. And I think, for me, that's where we are.
But all over the world, Inspector General of Police, Commander of Army, and so forth are appointed at the discretion of the President.
Which is okay.
And by the way, they still act independently. Because their constitutional provisions, they suffer more harm by violating the Constitution than disobeying the person in office. And the culture of people also offering themselves for resignation when they feel that they are incompetent or to give way to other,
cannot allow them to work.
Exactly. It doesn't mean that you are a bad person. It means, but last, let me say this. The Inspector General of Police, the deputies that are in office now, were hired out of competence. The interviews were public. Kimayo did not get that position because he was a Marakwet. He got that position because he was qualified. And he was the most qualified person in the police at that point in time. And the fact that he has chosen to retire, gives room also for another person who is more qualified. So let's avoid this argument. Because there are some people
for retiring. Although the question is whether he was actually asked, you must.
I don't know, but let's come to this point. Let's come to this point. There has been an argument. Let me come to the point because he's talking about tribalizing. There's been a political argument that Kimayo was
maybe negatively ethnicized.
Yes, that Kalenjin is the Inspector General. The next one must be a Kalenjin.
That's what they're saying.
I have always said that Kimayo got that position on his competence and being the most qualified officer.
We agree.
It is not because he was a Kalenjin. And the next Inspector General must come to office based on his competence. If he becomes a Kalenjin again, so be it. If he becomes a Rendile, let it be. Yeah. But let's get a person who is competent to run the office.
All right. Okay. I hope your people in Marakwet County are listening to you, because they are on a go-slow, protesting the removal of Kimayo.
What is funny about that? Let me that's a good question. Huh? Because
very quickly,
because for the first time, I'm able to
on the ground.
For the first time, I have been able to address that issue. And let me say this. You see, Kimayo speaks to the president, or spoke to the president every morning and evening, reporting on matters, and any other time for security purposes. How they conversed with the president, discussed and agreed that he was going to retire, really it should be a fallacy that on that account Murkomen was going to go on strike. Because really he's more closer to the person who was appointing or made him to retire than myself.
Okay, we need to wind up. There's this from Rukia in Wajir County. Good morning, Cheche. What we need is implementation of existing laws, securing our border, patriotism in the forces, fighting corruption, joining forces, scaling jobs and not about quick salaries, Kenyans trusting each other, devolving security. It will be a big blow to the people of Kenya if this bill passes as it is. And so a quick round robin before we leave. This bill has been described on the one hand as an extraordinary measure for extraordinary circumstances, on the other as reactionary and draconian. Given what we've heard from our learned friends who both helped frame the Constitution, what is your opinion?
Well, I think obviously people must be aware that we didn't look at all the clauses, the bad ones, the many bad ones we haven't even mentioned. There are good ones there, quite a few good clauses there that buttress.
So we keep them.
Situations which are not attended to. But I think the mentality or the mindset of the drafters of this Constitution,
of the bill, you mean?
Yes, of this bill, seem to have been terrified by the prospect or the threat of terrorism that we face, to the extent that they want to constrict us and make our life almost unbearable. We must balance between our security needs and desires to live peacefully and securely within our borders, with our fundamental freedoms which must continue to exist. And I think on the balance of the two, this bill is heavily against our liberties.
So it shouldn't. Mutegi, what do you
think what should happen is that the two, it should not be seen as a Jubilee code affair. It is these are things that affect ordinary people, and the expression, the media, and the freedoms, the Bill of Rights. They shouldn't go on tomorrow, not to demonstrate the way they are organizing, to have dialogue. Let them have a dialogue and come up bill that will suit everybody.
Okay. Kipchumba, since I gave you the first word, I'll give the last word to Dr. Aukot.
First of all, I'd like to say that, as you said, extraordinary times needs extraordinary measures. As a country, we must pull our act together as patriots. We must not use the argument of tyranny or numbers or bringing down the Jubilee government or whatever argument. Parliament tomorrow, I would like to see those who have opposed this bill come with concrete amendments. Let them be defeated on the floor so that they say, the minority have made their point. I believe that there are people who have measured arguments of both Jubilee and CORD, and we must be able to pull together. But as a country, we must get rid of training grounds for terrorism as provided for in this law. We must get rid of people who are going to incite and glorify terrorism. We must be able to deal with issues of proliferation of small arms so that we have institutions that are going to check that and so that we can make our country safer. Finally, I still think that the president needs to continue working harder to get the right people to be in the right security dockets so that then we can have also a proper implementation, not just the law.
So, I'll give you the final word.
Okay, my feeling is that, first of all, I think matters security are very important. We all need security assured. We need to be protected, our lives, our properties, investors, foreigners coming to Kenya. We need protection. But let's not do it at the expense of already established rights, existing freedoms of the individuals, of groups. My problem with this bill, I mean, we are not rejecting the attempt to improve matters security, but I think let's not be repetitive as this bill is. Let's not be emotional. Let's not be reactionary. I still hold the very strong view that there are adequate provisions in our existing legislation that can actually deal with some of the issues that this law is proposing even to amend. And I think if we are going to do that, it will be tantamount to us that every time somebody fails, we rush to Parliament and legislate. I think it's about time that we really ensure accountability is realized. If we don't realize accountability, we do not realize it by just trying to say, let's amend this law, let's amend that law. I think we have enough sufficient provision, and let's not skirt around the issues. The bill, in my view, has not addressed the underlying causes of insecurity or even of terrorism. For example, our KDF should be manning our borders, and I will suggest that the sooner they pull out of Somalia, the better for us.
Thank you very much then for your time. Our guests have given us quite a bit of their time this morning, and so we'll end the conversation there so that they can get on with their lives. Kipchumba Murkomen-Senator and law professor, Dr. Ekuru Aukot, constitutional lawyer and law professor as well. We thank you for your time this morning on Cheche. We also thank Mutegi Njau and David Makali for their robust opinions and questioning. And we thank you for watching and engaging with Cheche. We've been live on Citizen TV. My name is Udwaka Mimo. It's the last show of the year, so we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We'll see you on the other side.
Thank you.